Hare Krishna, welcome to today's Srimad Bhagavatam class. Before we start Srimad Bhagavatam class, let's do a simple Mangala Charana. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskarityam Naram Chai Narottamam Deving Saraswating Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraet Nasaparesha Vadareshu Nityam Bhagavate Vaya Bhagavate Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistikihi Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnana Jnana Salakaya Chaksuram Ratanjana Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Welcome everyone to today's Srimad Bhagavatam class. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 26. Chapter entitled the Aila Gita. So today's chapter is the continuation of the conversation between Lord Krishna and Uddhava, whereby Krishna will be telling the story of this chapter about one king by the name of King Pururava. Okay, this King Pururava is basically a chapter about the dangers of being too much attached to sense gratification. So the realization of this King Pururava is his Gita. Therefore, this chapter's name is Aila Gita. So, without much further ado, let's go to the first text. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, having achieved this human form of life, which affords one the opportunity to realize me, and being situated in my devotional service, one can achieve me, the reservoir of all pleasure, and the supreme soul of all existence, residing within the heart of every living entity. So here Krishna is explaining that because of bad association, the dangers of bad association, even those who are spiritually liberated may fall down from self-realization. Within this material world, the association of women is especially dangerous. And therefore in this chapter, Aila Gita is spoken to prevent such a fall down. One can be saved from sex attraction by association with saintly persons who awaken one's real spiritual intelligence. Therefore, Lord Krishna will speak to Uddhava and the amazing song of Pururava, also known as Aila Gita. Text number 2. A person fixed in transcendental knowledge is free from conditioned life by giving up his false identification with the product of the material modes of nature. Seeing these products as simply illusion, he avoids entanglement with the modes of nature, although constantly among them. Because the modes of nature and their product are simply not real, he does not accept them. So here Krishna is explaining about the three modes of nature and how it manifests as varieties of material bodies, places, families, countries, food, sports, war, peace, and so on. In other words, everything we see within the material world is constituted of the mode of nature. A liberated soul, although existing within the ocean of material energy, sees everything as the property of Lord Krishna and is thus not entangled. Although Maya attempts such a liberated soul to become a thief, to steal the property of the Lord for sense gratification, a Krishna conscious person does not bite the bait of Maya. He remains honest and pure in Krishna consciousness. In other words, he does not believe that anything within the universe can become his personal property for sense gratification, especially the illusory form of a woman. Text number 3. One should never associate with materialists whose dedicated to gratifying their genitals and bellies. By following them, one falls into the deepest pit of darkness, just like a blind man who follows another blind man. Text number 4. The following song was sung by a famous emperor, Pururava. When deprived of his wife Urvasi, he was at first bewildered, but by controlling his lamentation, he began to feel detachment. So this story about this King Pururava appears in the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 14. This Pururava was a great king whose glory was very, very, very vast. On being separated from his wife, Urvasi, he felt great bewilderment at first. But after meeting her briefly at Kurukshetra, he worshipped the demigods with the sacrificial fire given to him by the Gandharvas and receives the privilege of entering the planet where she resides. So this story of King Pururava appears in Canto 9, Chapter 14. I'll give you a quick synopsis of the story in Canto 9. So this King Pururava, he was a human king, okay, and he was extremely attractive, very, very handsome, and so attractive that his glories went all the way up to the court of King Indra. And in the court of King Indra had many apsaras, many heavenly damsels, and one of them was his favorite apsara by the name of Urvasi. So Urvasi, simply hearing the glories of King Pururava, she fell in love with this King Pururava, and she wanted to become King Pururava's wife. So upon meeting King Pururava, immediately she had attraction and she wanted to accept him as her husband. And King Pururava, so seeing the beauty of Urvasi, wanted her to be his wife. But she agreed to be his wife with two conditions. Number one, the first condition is that she should never see her husband naked other than being in their privacy of their room while having intercourse. That is number one. That is the first condition. She should never see the husband naked except for when they are about to have sex. Number two, under all circumstances, her husband, King Pururava, must protect her two pets, two sheep. She has two sheep. So this the story behind the sheep is a story within a story. We won't cover here this story today. We'll talk about it some other time. And also there is this curse that is put upon Urvasi, whereby she will feel attraction for only human kings. So therefore, the attraction that she had for this King Pururava is also because of a curse. So they got married, they enjoyed sex life very, very much, and this King Pururava became very, very much attached to this his wife Urvasi. So one day what happened was, King Indra in his court in heavenly planets felt great pangs of separation from his most favorite apsara, these heavenly damsels, Urvasi. So King Indra ordered his soldiers to go and bring back Urvasi from earth. So these soldiers went to earth and they found out that this King Pururava was tied by these two conditions. That is, she should never see him naked outside of her bedroom. And number two, she must protect her two sheep, two baby sheep, two lambs. So these soldiers of King Indra, what they did was, in the dead of night, they came to kidnap the two sheep. And these two sheep were crying. And hearing this cry of these Urvasi's pet goats, she started to scold her husband, Mr. King Pururava. I said, "Why are you sleeping like a coward? My pets are being in distress. Go and save them." So this King Pururava, not knowing what happened, he just jumped out of bed naked. He took his sword and he went to save his wife's pets. So after saving the wife's pets, he came back with the sheeps, with his baby goats. She immediately saw her husband naked outside her room. So the first condition was broken. So she left. She left the association of her husband just like that. She just left. And when she left, this King Pururava was calling out in great separation, "Oh lady, please don't go. Like that, his heart was broken. So what happened was, he lived a miserable life, being in separation of his most attached wife. And for many years, for a very, very long time, he used to wander the earth looking for her. So what happened was, one day in Kurukshetra, by chance, he saw her and he begged her, "Please come back to me. I cannot live without you." So this Urvasi told her husband, he says, "This is very pathetic. You are behaving like a weak, pathetic man. You shouldn't behave like this. But because you requested me of this, I will spend one day in a year with you from this point onwards. So that's what they did. They enjoyed each other's company one day in a year. So like this, it went on until King Pururava felt very, very unhappy because he cannot live without his wife because of sex attachment. So what do you call this King Pururava, he decided to ask her, what can I do to get you back? So Urvasi told this King Pururava, you go and see the Gandharvas, the soldiers of King Indra, and ask them what to do. So that's what he did. He went to them, and these soldiers, these Gandharvas, taught this King Pururava what is known today as Karma Kanda. Sacrificial sacrifice to the worship of devas for the purpose of gaining some material benefit. So our King Pururava is the very first human king that started this tradition of Karma Kanda, performing sacrificial worship to the devas only simply to gain material benefit. So to cut a long story short, he realized that no matter how much favor he gets from the devas, he could never be satisfied. And realizing that, he decided to become very much detached from his wife. So let's continue on with this Aila Gita. Text number 5. When she was leaving him, even though he was naked, he ran after her just like a madman and called out in great distress, "Oh, my wife, oh, terrible lady, please stop." So here is the part where his beloved wife was leaving him, and the shocked king was crying out, "Oh, my wife, please think of a moment, just stop, you terrible lady, can't you stop? Why don't you speak together for a while? Why are you killing me?" Thus lamenting, he followed her. Text number 6. Although for many years Pururava had enjoyed sex pleasure in the evening hours, still he was not satisfied by such insignificant enjoyment. His mind was so attracted to Urvasi that he did not notice how the nights were coming and going. Here the Pururava is experiencing the materialistic experience of being separated from his most attached wife. So this king, text number 7, King Aila said, "Alas, just see the extent of my delusion. This goddess who embraced me and held my neck in her grips, my heart is so polluted by lust that I have no idea how my life was passing." Text number 8. That lady cheated me so much that I did not even see the rising and the setting of the sun. Alas, for so many years I have passed my days in vain. So here, due to attachment to his wife, the goddess Urvasi, King Pururava forgot his devotional service to the Supreme Lord and became more concerned with pleasing this beautiful young lady. Thus he later lamented having wasted his valuable time. Thus, those who are Krishna conscious utilize every moment in the Lord's loving service. They don't make the mistake of falling for the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord. Text number 9. Alas, although I am supposed to be a mighty emperor, the crown jewel of all kings on this earth, just see how my bewilderment has rendered me a toy animal in the hand of a woman. So, since the king's body has become fully engaged in satisfying the superficial desire of woman, his body was now like a toy animal in their hands. Text number 10. Although I was a powerful lord with great opulence, that woman gave me up as if I were no more than an insignificant blade of grass. And still, naked and without shame, I followed her, crying out to her like a madman. Text number 11. Where are my so-called great influence, power and sovereignty? Just like an ass being kicked in the face by the she-ass, I ran after that woman who had already given me up. Text number 12. What is the use of a big education or a practice of austerity and renunciation? And what is the use of studying religious scripture and living in solitude and silence if after all that one's mind is stolen by a woman? So here King Pururava is making a very, very important point. Although all these achievements are useless if one's heart and mind are stolen by an insignificant woman, one who hankers after a woman's association certainly spoils his spiritual progress. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur states that if one worships the example of a liberated gopi of Vrindavan who accepts Lord Sri Krishna as their lover, one can free one's mental activities from the contamination of lust. So very important point here. The ultimate cure for lust is the lotus feet of Sri Krishna and the loving association of the gopis of Vrindavan. Text number 13. To hell with me. I am such a fool that I didn't even know what was good for me. Although I arrogantly thought I was highly intelligent, although I achieved the exalted position of a lord, I allow myself to be conquered by women as if I were a bullock or a jackass. So here King Aila is being very, very hard on himself. He says here that all the fools of this world consider themselves very wise scholars, even though intoxicated by sense gratification and maddened by their lust for women association, they become just like a jackass, like a donkey. By the mercy of a saintly spiritual master, these lusty propensities can gradually be removed, and one can understand the terrible, contemptible nature of material sense gratification. In this verse, King Pururava is coming to his senses in Krishna consciousness. Text number 14. Even after I had served the so-called nectar of the lips of Urvasi for many years, my lusty desires kept rising again and again within my heart and were never satisfied, just like a fire that can never be extinguished by the oblations of ghee poured into its flames. Text number 15. Who but the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who lies beyond the material perception and is the Lord of self-satisfied sages, can possibly save my consciousness, which has been stolen by a prostitute? So here, this point here is very, very important. This last one, once it infects the living entity heart, it will never leave the living entity's heart. Even though sometimes you might feel like, oh, it subsides, it's gone down, I don't have to worry about lust. Or sometimes you might even cheat yourself and say, oh, I'm not lusty, I'm a very great sage. But the nature of lust is that it will come up every once in a while. It will come up unexpectedly, and it will torture the living entity's consciousness. It will torture the mind. Sometimes you can't even have good sleep. So the solution here is given in text 15. And King Pururava says here, only the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who Sri Krishna, who lies beyond the material perception, is the Lord of self-satisfied sages, can possibly save my consciousness, which has been stolen by a prostitute. Only Krishna can save. So the only way Krishna can save you is if you take to the shelter of Krishna's lotus feet with all determination, all surrender. Then Krishna can save you. There is no chance lust can live in your heart so long as Krishna is staying in your heart. Text number 16. Because I allowed my intelligence to become dull, and because I failed to control my senses, the great confusion in my heart did not go away, even though Urvasi herself gave me wise counsel with well-spoken words. So, in the 9th canto in Srimad Bhagavatam, this Urvasi plainly told Pururava that he should never trust women and believe their promises. Despite this frank advice, he became fully attached and thus suffered great mental anguish. Text number 17. How can I blame her for my trouble when I myself am ignorant of my real spiritual nature? I did not control my senses, and so I am like a person who mistakenly sees a harmless rope as a snake. So this is the nature of one who is in lust. When a person mistakenly thinks that a rope is a snake, he becomes fearful and anxious. Actually, there's nothing to fear. But because he is in illusion, everything around him becomes very, very frightening, very, very frightful. Such fear and anxiety are, of course, illusion, since the rope can never bite. Similarly, one who mistakenly thinks that the material illusory energy of the Lord exists for his personal sense gratification will certainly bring down on his head an avalanche of material illusory fear and anxiety. King Pururava frankly admits here that the young lady Urvasi is not to blame. After all, it was Pururava who mistakenly considered her to be an object of his personal enjoyment, and therefore he suffered the reactions by the law of nature. Pururava himself was the offender for trying to exploit the external form of Urvasi. So it is not the woman's fault if a man is suffering. It is not the woman's fault. The man must take responsibility for his actions. Similarly, one who is advancing in spiritual life, whether you're a man or a woman, you have to take responsibility for your own behavior. You cannot go on blaming others for your difficulties in life. Text number 18. What is this polluted body anyway? So filthy and full of bad odor. I was attracted by the fragrance and beauty of a woman's body. But what are those so-called attractive features? They are simply a false covering created by illusion. So Pururava now understands that although he was madly attracted to the fragrant, shapely body of his wife Urvasi, in fact that body was a sack of stool, gas, bile, mucus, hair and other very terrible elements, very smelly elements. In other words, Pururava is now becoming sane. Text number 19 to 20. One can never decide whose property the body actually is. Does it belong to one's parents, who have given birth to it, to one's wife, who gave it pleasure, or to one's employer, who orders the body around? Is it the property of the funeral fire, or of the dogs and the jackals who may ultimately devour it? Is it the property of the indwelling soul, who partakes in its happiness and distress? Or does the body belong to intimate friends who encourage and help it? Although a man never definitely ascertains the proprietor of the body, he becomes most attached to it. The material body is a polluted material form of heading towards a lowly destination. Yet, when a man stares at the face of a woman, he thinks, what good looking lady, what a charming nose she's got, and see her beautiful smile. So the phrase headed towards a lowly destination indicates that if buried, the body will be consumed by worms. If burnt, it will turn to ash, and if dying in a lonely place, it will be consumed by dogs and vultures. The illusory potency of Maya enters within the female form and bewilders a man's mind. The man is attracted to Maya appearing within the female form, but when he embraces the woman's body, he ends up with 2 handfuls of stool, blood, mucus, pus, skin, bone, hair and flesh. People should not be like cats and dogs, in the ignorance of the bodily consciousness. A human being should be enlightened in Krishna consciousness and learn to serve the Supreme Lord without falsely trying to exploit his potencies. Text number 21. What difference is there between ordinary worm and a person who is trying to enjoy this material body composed of skin, flesh, blood, muscles, fat, marrow, bone, stool, urine and pus? Text number 22. Yet even one who theoretically understands the actual nature of the body should never associate with women or with men attached to women. After all, the contact of the senses with their object inevitably agitates the mind. Text number 23. Because the mind is not disturbed by that which is neither seen nor heard, the mind of a person who restricts the material senses will automatically be checked in its material activities and become pacified. So it may be argued that even while closing one's eye, while dreaming or while living in a solitary place, one may remember or contemplate sense gratification. So that is all our personal experience. Such an experience, however, is due to previous sense gratification that one repeatedly saw and heard about. When one restricts the senses from the object, especially from intimate contact with women, the mind material propensity will slacken, becomes weak, and like a fire without fuel eventually dies. There's a saying, in the nectar of instruction, Srila Rupa Goswami, he writes there, mind constantly proposals of sense gratification is the solution is to simply ignore the mind. Just ignore the mind. In fact, the word used by Srila Prabhupada in nectar of instruction is neglect. Just neglect the mind. Don't pay too much attention. The more attention you pay to the mind, the more powerful it becomes, and the more it becomes a bigger obstacle. So the more you ignore it, and the more you force your consciousness to be at the lotus feet of Sri Krishna by chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, by associating him, by listening to classes or reading Srimad Bhagavatam, then the mind becomes very slackened. Text number 24. Therefore, one should never let his senses associate freely with women and with men attached to women. Even those who are highly learned cannot trust the 6 enemies of the mind. What to speak then of foolish persons like me? Text number 25. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, having thus chanted this song, Maharaj Pururava, eminent among the demigods and human beings, gave up the position he had achieved in the planet of Urvasi. His illusion cleansed away by transcendental knowledge. He understood me to be the supersoul within his heart, and so at last achieved peace. Text number 26. An intelligent person should therefore reject all bad association and instead take up the association of saintly devotees whose words cut off the excessive attachment of one's mind. Text number 27. My devotees fix their mind on me and do not depend upon anything material. They are always peaceful, endowed with equal vision, and free from possessiveness, false ego, duality, and greed. So in Srila Rupa Goswami's Nectar of Instruction, there's a very, very nice verse. There he says there that the 6 enemies of the mind, the 6 enemies of devotion is Atyahar Priyasya Prajalpo Niyamagraha Janasanga Laulyamcha Sabir Bhaktir Vinashati. The 6 enemies are excessive eating or accumulation of material assets, Atyahar Priyasya, greedy for mundane material achievements, Atyahar Priyasya Prajalpo, loose stock that is revolving around women, money, and wine. Prajalpa Niyamagraha. Niyamagraha is ignoring the rules and regulation in the Vedic scripture for elevation in spiritual life, or pretending to follow such rules and regulation simply for name and fame. Niyamagraha. Jana Sangha. Jana Sangha is association of people who are interested in women and sex and money. And Laulyamcha. Laulyamcha here means greedy. Greedy and lusty for association of women. So these are the six enemies of devotion. The 6 enemy of the mind also. Text number 28. O greatly fortunate Uddhava, in the association of such saintly devotees, there is constant discussion of me, and those partaking in this chanting and hearing of my glories are certainly purified of all sins. So here Krishna is giving a very, very nice instruction. Even if one does not receive direct instruction from a pure devotee, simply by hearing him glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one can be purified of all sinful reaction caused by one's involvement in illusion. Krishna says the same thing also in Bhagavad Gita in chapter 10, text 9. Mat chitta matgata prana bodhayantas parasparam katayascha nityam chusyanticha ramanticha. The purport in the translation is the same as this verse. Text number 29. Whoever hears, chants, and respectfully takes to heart this topic about me becomes faithfully dedicated to me and thus achieve my devotional service. So here Krishna says that one who hears from advanced devotees of Lord Krishna can be saved from the ocean of material existence, just as how this King Pururava was saved from this ocean of material lamentation. When one obeys the order of a bona fide spiritual master, the polluted working of the mind are stopped, they are checked. One sees things in a new spiritual light, and there blossoms the propensity for selfless loving service to the Lord, which gives the fruit of love of Godhead. So actually the natural propensity of the living entity is actually to render loving devotional service to Krishna. Jivara Surupa hoy, Krishna Nitya Das. That is the natural thing, most natural thing. You don't have to go to school, you don't have to be trained, you don't have to do anything. This is naturally built into the character of the living entity, the nature of the eternal nature of the spirit soul. That is to render service, loving devotional service to the lotus feet of Sri Krishna. And when you hear such narrations from the lips of pure devotees who have surrendered themselves to the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, this natural propensity within our heart will be aroused. And it is the most wonderful, most natural thing. It's the most, I don't know how else to explain it to you. It's just the most natural thing ever. It's just like a duck swimming in the water. Text number 30. What more remains to be accomplished for the perfect devotee after achieving devotional service unto me, the Supreme Absolute Truth, whose qualities are innumerable and who am the embodiment of all aesthetic experience? So Krishna here is explaining about devotional service, and he says that devotional service is so pleasing that a pure devotee cannot desire anything except service to the Lord. In the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Krishna told the gopis that they would have to accept their own service as the ultimate reward of their devotion to him, since nothing awards as much happiness and knowledge as devotional service itself. When one sincerely chants and hears the holy name and fame of Lord Krishna, the heart is purified and gradually one can appreciate the actual blissful nature of Krishna consciousness, loving service to Lord Sri Krishna's lotus feet. So here the important point to make here is Krishna is making the point in Canto 10, and when Krishna is speaking to the gopis, Krishna was so much indebted to the gopis that he told them there is no greater thing I can award anyone than what you already have, what the gopis already have. They had pure devotional service within their own heart. And Krishna says, you please be satisfied with that as your reward. There is nothing even Krishna can give beyond devotional service. It is so wonderful. Text number 31. Just as cold, fear and darkness are eradicated from one who has approached the sacrificial fire, so dullness, fear and ignorance are destroyed for ones engaged in the service of the devotees of the Lord. So those engaged in fruitive activities are certainly dull. They lack higher awareness of the Supreme Lord and the soul. Materialists are engaged more or less mechanically in gratifying the senses and ambition, and thus they are considered dull and practically unconscious. All such dullness, fear and ignorance are removed when one serves the lotus feet of the Lord. Just as cold, fear and darkness are removed when one approaches a fire. Text number 32. The devotees of the Lord, peacefully fixed in absolute knowledge, are the ultimate shelter for those who are repeatedly rising and falling within the fearful ocean of material life. Such devotees are just like a strong boat that comes to rescue persons who are at the point of drowning. Text number 33. Just as food is life of all creatures, just as I am the ultimate shelter for the distressed, and just as religion is the wealth of those who are passing away from this world, so my devotees are the only refuge of person fearful of falling into the miserable condition of life. So those fearful of being dragged down by material lust and anger should take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord's devotees, who can engage one safely in the Lord's loving service. So for those who don't have physical association of such devotees, the highest form of association besides physical association is to listen to their instructions. And in the ISKCON Desire 3 audio, there are unlimited number of classes given by Srila Prabhupada and his disciples. And the topics discussed are all very, very sweet. So that is a very good opportunity for everyone to get some association through instructions, through listening to classes. Text number 34. My devotees bestow divine eyes, whereas the sun allows only external sight, and that only when it is rising in the sky. My devotees are once real worshipable deities and real family. They are one's own self, and ultimately they are not different from me. So here Krishna is glorifying his devotees. Krishna in Canto 10, he says, my devotees are more merciful than me. Krishna, if you can see Krishna's pastime, sometimes he don't give mercy so easily, But Krishna's devotees, they are more merciful than Krishna. The most merciful devotee of Krishna in this world today is Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada by far, the most merciful. He has accepted fallen souls as his disciples, and he has blessed them, so that they can progress in spiritual life. So in this verse, it is explained here that the foolishness in the wealth of the impious who place great value on their treasures and firmly make up their mind to remain in the darkness of ignorance. Saintly devotees of the Lord are just like the sun. By the light of their words, the living entity's eyes of knowledge are opened and their darkness of ignorance is destroyed. Thus the saintly devotees are one's real friend and relatives. They are the proper recipient of service, not the gross material body, which merely clamors for sense gratification. So Krishna here is explaining that actually his pure devotees who have deep compassion for all of us, without any expectation of any reward or any acknowledgement. These devotees, Krishna is saying, is the most qualified personalities to receive our service, our love and our attention, our affection. These are the personalities that deserve to be honored and respected at all times. Text number 35. Thus losing his desire to be on the same planet as Uddhava, Maharaj Pururava began to wander the earth free of all material association and completely satisfied within the self. So this is the chapter on Aila Gita, is the story of King Pururava. So you can see here that by the association of pure devotees, one can easily save themselves from unlimited miserable conditions of life. Means King Pururava was a very, very good example of it. He took shelter of pure devotees and he did not waste his time in pursuing, so-called sense gratification. So by taking to the process of Krishna consciousness, one can save oneself a tremendous amount of suffering. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Krishna